Oh, that started again. What's up, everyone? It's Justin from Creator Wizard. Super stoked to be back at you every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, doing our live stream all about brand deals, monetization, content strategy. And today we have a very, very special guest. I am super excited to have Mario Joos, who is a super experienced YouTube data analyst that works with 10 million plus subscriber creators on YouTube. Welcome, Mario.
Hey, nice to see you. Thanks for
What's up,
having me, by the
man?
way. Love it.
Absolutely. Thanks for jumping in. Just want to shout out to D and fam. What's going on? Tuning in from Canada. What's up, Emily? Keto Twins. Thank you so much for joining. What's up, Max from Slav Guns? What's up? Yeah. So today is a really special episode because I think I first like connected with you on Twitter or maybe Clubhouse, something like that. You know, you were dropping lots of gems and knowledge in the early days of Clubhouse. And, you know, I just am very, very impressed with your level of experience and knowledge and expertise. And so I thought maybe we could just kick it off with sharing a little bit about your backstory. You know, I understand, obviously you work with like really large creators on content strategy and things like that. But also you were a streamer previously. So I'm just kind of curious to, you know, hear a little bit more about your background.
No, actually, I'll kick it off right away. I got into this content creator industry, I think in 2014. I wanted to become a professional gamer. Didn't really work out that well. My parents told me like, "Hey, start earning a little bit of money." So financially, it was very interesting. So I got into Twitch. And from there on, eventually, I started growing on Twitch. I went back on that journey of professional gamer, eventually started a career there and became one of the best players in a game called PUBG. Then after a few years of doing that, I kind of wanted to figure out what's next for me in life. And I decided to, hey, you know what? What about instead of in front of the camera, I'll be behind the camera, use some thinking and stuff, and just use my strategic thinking for something else, like more business related. So I got into influencer marketing. That's about 1.5 years ago, just finding brand deals and all that stuff. So I had a brief touch there. Um, but then eventually, like the company that I was working with, it just didn't fit me that well, and I figured out that I wanted to do stuff myself. I wanted to lead stuff. I wanted to take initiative in the business that I do, in the companies that I work in, and eventually had the opportunity to work for a YouTuber called Cup. He has about 14 million subscribers, I think, right now. It's been a while since I checked, so. As you can notice, like I don't really work with him anymore. But since then, I've moved on to bigger creators and other creators as well, and just try to help them to understand YouTube a lot better than they do. And what's so fascinating about these big creators is that, they already know how YouTube works. They make hundreds of thousands, millions a year. So they are really good at what they do. So for me to come in there and try to bring their business to the next level, it's a challenge. And I love myself a challenge. And at the beginning, not gonna lie, it was very hard because I've only been doing this for a year. But if you dedicate every single second into learning, that's still what I do every single day. And eventually you can find these grains of expertise that you can give, and seeing their channels grow. Before the show, we actually talked about it. One of the channels I work with, they had 17 million views in a month, and now they're about to hit 60 million views in a month. And that's just of those little pieces of advice that sometimes take long to research, but once you implement them, it can just bring that. It can like it tripled his amount of monthly views. But that's because it's very tricky for those big channels. But again, all the advice that works for the big channels also works for the small channels, and that's why we're
Yeah.
here to share that knowledge, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's super fascinating. And like that's actually one thing that I think I wanted to dig in real quickly about this piece, which is that I think the vast majority of creators don't look at their analytics in general. That's been my experience. Like people, they make a lot of content, and then when they get frustrated that they're not seeing traction, they just blame YouTube or blame the algorithm or blame something like that. But in my experience, like the creators in general, not just on YouTube, but across platforms, whether it's on Instagram or Twitch or whatever platform, your TikTok, whatever, there is like a very clear, for the most part, there's like very clear steps that you can follow to like improve your content and things like that. Has that been your experience, that like most creators in general in your that you've come across don't really like think too seriously about looking at their analytics and
You
insights?
would be surprised how many creators have millions of subs and still do not look at their analytics. They have like, funny enough, sometimes I talk with these people and I'm like, you know what, hey, go to your browse CTR or something, right? And for those in the audience who are not so familiar with browse CTR, it's pretty much like the click-through rate, but then more specifically from your browse traffic sources. And most of them are like, wait, where do I even find this? And then I tell them, go to that little advanced thing, that blue advanced button. So they're like, I've never even been on here. And I'm like, you have millions of subscribers, you haven't been on here. Now I understand it because they're so busy making content. But that's the thing is, some creators have experience with just looking their traffic sources, others go to CTR and stuff, and others go to advanced analytics. But those looking at advanced analytics, it's a very, very small amount of creators that do that. Because again, like how it is with YouTube is very simple. Not everybody takes the business approach. Most people create content and it either blows up or it either doesn't do anything at all. So that's pretty much the path for most of them.
What are you, just to dig into that specifically? What are you looking for when you look at something like browse CTR? Like, what are the actionable steps that you can take by looking at that information?
So what's important is actually to understand that metric, right? So the way that I look at it is that there is not just one algorithm, right? And I think about a week ago, YouTube made a video about it themselves. But pretty much you want to look at multiple algorithms. Like the search one is what everybody talks about, but that's if you really think about it, it's the least important one. Two important ones are actually your browse and your suggested. And you have to understand that your browse audience is most of the times your own audience. So if you see that your CTR is extremely low, then you can be like, hey, my own audience isn't interested in this video, right? That's how you can interpret those stats. But again, if you are, maybe your videos are going really well with your own audience, but you're just not reaching a new audience, then you can look at your suggested CTR and see like, hey, my own audience likes my videos. They're interested in all of my videos. But once this gets served to like newer people, nobody's interested in the concept. So I'm going to have to fix something there. And that's why, again, the total CTR and stuff, I'm going to say this, it is almost a worthless stat, except for maybe if you really start your channel very early and you have no audience or your audience is a little mixed, then you could look at the stat and be like, okay, now I got 20 CTR, that's great. Now I got 2 CTR, that's okay. But once your CTR stabilizes, and for those CTRs click-through rate, once that starts stabilizing and you're hitting like 7, 9, and always around that or a little bit higher, then you're going to have to look more specifically to where does it go wrong? Which traffic source am I failing to hit and why? So yeah, those analytics are super crucial because you want to understand your audience. You want to understand who's interested in your video, who's not. And now I'm talking about these numbers, but the most important of all is your audience retention. And most specifically, the chart itself. If you see people drop off at the beginning, like 50%, you got to fix your intro. But if halfway through your video, like if everything goes well and halfway through your video, everybody tunes out, then you might want to rethink that second part there. So those are a little bit of the metrics and a little bit of a guidance. Like if you are looking into analytics, what are the things that you want to be paying attention to and try to understand better, because it's all about understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, I think, when you do start talking about like granular level, like metrics and how you should interpret those and things like that, like I thought what would be interesting to talk a little bit about platform strategy in general, because let's say that you want to succeed on YouTube or want to succeed on any platform. It's just like, there's only so much time in the day, right? And so it's like, I know a lot of creators just feel very burnt out. So it's like, okay, am I going to go all in on YouTube and like look at all the data and like try and make informed decisions and all this stuff? Or should I like have an approach where it's like I'm spending 30% of my time on YouTube and 30% on Instagram and 30% on, Clubhouse and like, all this stuff. So it's like, how do you think about platform strategy in general for either the creators that you work with or just advice to creators in general? Like if they're thinking about themselves as a business, like where should you be spending your time?
I think this is the thing, and I think not many people have this, and that's a clear channel vision. Because if you have a channel vision, if okay, like I talked to a guy who plays violin, right? And he has a very successful violin channel. And I told him, like, where's your vision? Because, I need to know, what do you want to achieve? Because if you're going to make TikToks, what's the purpose of that? Is it just to get views? Because in my opinion, views isn't really a vision. It's just the way to earn money. And earning money can be the vision, but I don't think that's a great vision to have. So if you're like, okay, you know what? I just want to make this great channel, 100,000 subscriber channel, and I want to target X amount of people, then you want to build your strategies surrounding that and make sure that everything that you do serves that vision. Because if you're suddenly going to, like you mentioned, Clubhouse, if you're a creator and your goal is to create a massive channel to have as wide of a reach possible to touch people with your content on YouTube, then why are you on Clubhouse?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it is to gather some information about YouTube, but at the same time, is this the most efficient spend of your time? It's the same. I notice there's a lot on YouTube right now. People, they want to grow this long formed vlogging type of content, and nothing against it. That is your choice. That's your vision, right? But then suddenly I see them make these skit TikToks, and I'm like, yeah, you get 2,000 views from it, but this doesn't get you close to your vision because you're building an audience in something that doesn't align with your vision. So when you do that, so you take your vision and make sure that everything aligns to your vision, everything works towards your vision. That's really what it comes down to. And when it comes down to the burned out feeling, because obviously burned out is a big issue. Burned out from too much work is that you're not being smart enough with your work. And that's just me being very blunt right now. But if you are wasting, if you're wasting 4 hours a day for your thumbnails, for example, right? It could be maybe you're really into these thumbnails. Find out a way that you can, first of all, is it really needed to do those 4 hours? And second of all, maybe you can spend about 8 hours to figure out a way to speed up this process and make sure that in the future you only have to spend like an hour a day on those thumbnails. So time efficiency also helps with that. But in the end, these are a few little. It's all over the place. But you gotta improve every single aspect, and that way your workflow will improve. It will be less daunting. And again, some of the burnouts come like as a creative burnout. You have that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'm not a creative person. But ask me to come up with 100 video ideas. I'll find a system that helps me come up with those ideas, and then you will never get burned out.
So how do you figure out what are the most high impact things that you should concentrate on as a creator? So it's like, I think that as a up and coming creators, you think everything is important. The thumbnail is important. The editing is important. Like all this stuff. It's like you have to be the one to touch it. But how do you figure out what your zone of genius is as a creator? Right? Because like maybe it is, you know what I mean? So it's like as you're thinking about, because the other struggle is like, as you're starting out and wanting to get more efficient, you don't necessarily have the funds to like bring on a bunch of people onto your team to like outsource and delegate these other tasks like thumbnails and editing and things like that. So it's like, how do you figure out, how to identify if you're looking at your creator identity or like, the brand that you're trying to create? How do you like, if you were going to come in and consult with a creator, like, how do you say like, hey, stop doing all these things. You need to focus on this because that's your superpower. Like, how do you assess that?
Yeah. So the first thing that I do is, and I'm going to go, I'm going to give an example, right? So this example is non-YouTube specific, but it's going to make sense in the end. If you have a car, you want to make the car faster. You have two options. Either you replace the tires with better tires, right? And that way you improve your car speed by 3, 5, 6, maybe even 10%. Worse, like let's say these are super tires, 10%. Or what you could do is spend more time, design a new engine, and then get the car running. Because maybe the one person who replaced their tires, they might be miles ahead, but in the long run, you will be ahead of them. And that's pretty much what I'm looking for when I'm working with big creators, is that I'm not looking for these little tricks. There's so many YouTube videos, how to get 1,000 views fast, how to get 1,000 subs fast. If I like those kind of tricks, they're okay. You need to know about them. But the problem is they're not going to fix your engine. They're not going to make your engine faster. So what I do with these big creators is I try to look at their engine. I try to look at how they think about content. How are they talking to their audience, right? What's the big picture here that we're looking at? And if we change this and we take a step back sometimes and we change and work on this stuff, then we can grow. And again, even with somebody who gets 100,000 views per video, if I think about a strategy or I think about a certain topic, if I feel like this topic is not going to increase its views with 3 times as many views, I am not going to invest time in this topic. So, just changing, like, you have these people researching, like, hey, should I smile on my thumbnail or should I look worried on my thumbnail? The problem is it doesn't matter. None of that matters because it's just a small little fix. What you want to start doing is, rather than try to understand how your face needs to look like, which specific color score is better, green or blue, like, don't focus on all those simple little mini things. Focus on the big picture. Ask the big question: what makes a good thumbnail? And once you start covering these complex big questions, if you can solve a big question, you're going to get big growth out of it. And that's pretty much what I do with those creators, is like, we look at the big picture. We don't, like, yes, we know how to do our tags and stuff, but again, many creators ask, how should I do my tags? It's, yeah, do they matter? Sure, they matter maybe for 0.5% or whatever, but they, like, just putting a single tag isn't going to triple your views. If you're at 5 views, maybe, but is it going to get you 100,000 views? No. So what's important? You have to think. If you think about yourself, when would you watch a video? If it's interesting, right? You know, if something has a very specific little green thing on the edge of the thumbnail, are you going to click more, or are you going to be like, great video? No, you don't care. If the interestingest topic, the thumbnail can be ugly, you know, the camera angles can be mediocre, like, all of that stuff is possible, and you will still click on it because you're interested. So focus on those things more, and then you're actually going to grow. And it is complex and it's very vague, but it's literally how we do it.
Let's talk about, so how is the average creator supposed to be objective about figuring out what's an actually interesting topic or interesting piece of content to make if you don't have someone with your level of expertise to, like, tell them that, right? Are there the resources that you direct people toward? Like, how, like, what is the best way to learn, like, how to improve in terms of, like, the content, the type of even content that you're making?
A great way to work with it is learn very basic spreadsheets. Like, and the reason why I'm saying spreadsheets is, are like, pick a channel, right? Pick a great channel and be like, okay, in this channel, let me now say, like, this could be a big channel. You know, big channels have bad and good videos. You know, pick the bad videos, pick the good videos, put them next to each other, put them in a separate list, and start observing and try to identify, okay, what's different between this list of videos and this list of videos. And then when you eventually figure something out and see a connection there, like, hey, it seems that if it's more about this kind of stuff, you know, and it's not like it could be as simple as, like, oh, this is Minecraft and this is makeup channel, and every time he plays Minecraft there's bad views, and every single time he does makeup is great views. But it can be that simple, or it could be very complex. But the more patterns you start recognizing, the more you're gonna get big lessons. And then what you do is just apply those lessons to your own content. And that makes it the easiest to stay objective, is just look at the data, do some data analysis. It doesn't have to be grand scale. Like, I sometimes, I might do it with tens of thousands of videos maybe, but most of the times, a group of 10 and 10 is good enough to make a single lesson. So that's a way to do it. Within your own analytics as well, like, I see somebody in chat mention grouping in Studio Analytics. It's the same thing. You just put two groups of comments, two groups of videos against each other, and see, okay, which ones score better, and what seems to be the difference between group A and group B. It's kind of like A/B testing videos,
right?
So
yeah,
then you just go from the lessons from there on.
Right. And I think that this is perhaps getting even, like, complex for people who don't even look at their analytics. So I think this is a really good conversation, right? Because it's like, what I'm hoping, honestly, one of the most important things that I'm hoping to get out of this conversation for everyone watching is, like, start looking at your analytics, start being purposeful, start getting familiar with the terminology, whether it's on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or whatever. Start being looking familiar, and look, at the very least, if you're not comparing content of other channels and things like that, look at your own stuff. Like, look, are there multiple different types of content that you're making that you all of a sudden notice that, like, this one type of content that you're making is performing way better than these other types of content, if you have a channel where you're doing different types of content too. So it's like, that's like one of the major things I want people to get from this. And by the way, like, if you have any questions for Mario or you want us to cover, make sure to drop it in the chat. We're just, like, having a good time talking over here, but we definitely want to answer any questions that you guys have around content strategy, monetization, etc. So to that note, Mario, like, one thing that like I was curious about is like, of all the creators that you have worked with over the years and currently work with and thing like that, are there any common themes that you found for the ones who are, let's say, the most business savvy, you know?
Yeah. No, so the thing is like this. They really just treat, like you mentioned the word business. They literally treat it like a business. And you notice it that when you talk to those creators, right? I've been on events with those creators. They do not talk like, yeah, I did this little thing and that got me views. No, they're very down to earth. They're very simple about it. They're very tactical. You know, if they make a video or they make a stream or whatever they do for their content, they know why they are making it because it makes sense. They're also not only consistent in their upload schedule because, you know, that's what everybody talks about. And yeah, sure, you need to be you need to be consistent there. But at the same time, they're also consistent with their content and they know what they're trying to do. They have that vision, which I talked about earlier. And then so that the audience who watches them doesn't get confused. If you watch them and you like the stuff, you know that the next day you're going to come back and you're going to get something similar to this experience, you know? And at the same time, you know, like you're not going to come for a surprise that you come in and you're like, oh, he's doing something completely different. And something else as well, consistency and personality. You know, if you're going to be a crazy person, you need to be crazy in every single video. Don't be like, it is, you know, I see this constantly, and especially with streamers, they have this where a week they go full in and they're super entertaining. And the next week you come in and they start talking like it's like, you know, and it just, it just, I have friends like that. I have told them this, you know, it is because there is no consistency in your personality. People don't like randomness. People like when they, you know, when you go and watch your show, you expect the same type of jokes. You know, if you come for lame jokes, you expect lame jokes. If you come for these intriguing, complex, multidimensional jokes, you better have them ready every single video. So that is, I think, the main thing that most of these bigger creators do. They know that they got to do that. And other than that, they take it like a business. They don't take anything personal. And when something goes bad, they start analyzing. They start thinking, okay, what went bad? They look constantly for ways to improve on their bad stuff, but even their good stuff. They're not like, yes, I got a great video, let me celebrate for a whole week. No, they're like, okay, great video, let me move on, let me go to the next video and start thinking, okay, what's my video to video improvement? What, this video went great, okay, let's get 500k views. Okay, what made this video not be able to get 600k views? You know, and I think that's where people stuck. They have these goals and they set these goals like, oh, you know, I would be happy at 10k views. They get 10k views and then they settle and then they start laying back. That's especially where the growth stops most of the times because they set for that. And it's like, you made 10k, but you got to think somebody out there has 100k. Now look at your best video and start comparing that to their video and try to figure out, what am I doing wrong that I'm not getting 100k views? And once you start, you know, at every single level for yourself compared to others and try to analyze and understand, you know, don't take anything personal. You know, again, that's the beautiful thing about these big creators. If I work with a small creator, I'm very careful with saying, this is what you're doing wrong, because I know it will hurt their feelings. But if I work with the big creators, I had one time that a big creator came up to me and was like, yeah, I worked the whole week on this. You know, this was so good. And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is the worst video that you've made. So, and I told him in his face, I was like, yeah, this is just boring. Like, this is not good. And due to these reasons, obviously, I'm not going to just trash talk them. But I tell them straight in their face. And from being hyped, there's instantly like, okay, explain. They do this whole thing like, And then after I explain my stuff, they're like, you're right. Let me change that. Next time, you know, they're not hurt by what I say. They take these lessons, they see where it went wrong, implement it, and within no time, boom, suddenly their views are up even more, and they're still happy, you know. So yeah, that's it's all mindset pretty much. That's what it comes down to, really.
Yeah, you know, I had hired Patty Galloway. For those of you guys who know Patty, has a very successful YouTube channel and is also kind of like a YouTube strategist. And, you know, one of the pieces of feedback that he gave me when you're talking about consistency was that I was doing these long form video interviews with people that were like, let's say 30 to 40 minutes, something like that. And then I was having my like 7-minute videos, right? And when we were digging into the analytics, it was like very clear that like people preferred a certain type of form, like the audience, when they were coming back to my channel, they didn't know what to expect. Right. So it's like, I have like, you know, I'm faced with a decision. Do I want to keep doing the 30-minute videos? Maybe if people are preferring, let's say, an 8 to 12-minute video, maybe I need to make my interviews 8 to 12 minutes now, right? It's like if I want to do a similar type of format where it's like snappy and it's like maybe I'm not going to just let my guest ramble for 30 minutes or whatever, and I should set the expectation when I do talk with them that this interview is going to be, even if we talk for 40 minutes on like the Zoom when we record it, I'm gonna like cut it down into like 10 minutes or something. So I set that expectation up front so they're not surprised, right? So I think that it's like that's a very critical insight that you need to make as a creator that I wasn't even thinking about, where it's like, wow, if I'm doing these like very different types of content on my channel, maybe that's an issue, in the grand scheme of things.
I'm gonna jump on this one, right? Because I feel like there's something else that needs to be addressed, and I might really make some people angry with saying this, but
okay.
The advice like, oh, your cameras don't matter, you can film with your phone, I'm gonna call BS on that. I'm trying to keep my words here. But it's so bad advice. Same with microphone. Microphone quality is the most crucial thing. I don't have perfect microphone quality here because I'm not trying to be a YouTuber. But, that stuff changes. It changes the way that people look at you. Even dressing. I used to wear a cap when I was a gamer. I used to wear a cap and all this stuff. All this like sweatpants, chill clothing, because you dress to the occasion. And that's the same on YouTube. If you're an expert and you're talking on a field of thing and you're sitting there in your sweatpants talking business advice, sorry, nobody's going to take you serious. And that's what you're trying to target. You need to cater to your demographic. Clothing matters. The way you look matters. Microphone matters. Your setting matters.
I'm zooming up your profile photo here.
If I'm correct, like normally I deleted everything there. There you go. I got the cap on. That was a totally different me. But that's that worked back then. If I do that now, that would just not work with the work. It probably would, but still, like I do think as a content creator, it's still important, for a lot of people. Like the lighting, if you don't have a front light, like I'm sorry, it's gonna come off differently. It's not as easy, I don't have a front light right now. You have a front light, and you can clearly see that your face just has more contrast to them. Great face. There you
go.
That?
Is that right?
Perfect thumbnail face right there. No, but that's the thing is that people need to understand that gear and stuff is important. If you want to be successful, you have to invest in your success. You can't just expect to show up, and that's not only with these kind of things, but the same with prepping. Don't expect to just start a game, record all the way through, upload it, and get views. No, there's people out there who have a team of 10 people editing every single second of their gaming video. They have pre-planning. They have aftercare, analysis. I do analysis, for example. They have people during the recording, creative directors. They have idea people. They have editors. These editors, they run through multiple versions. There is so much that comes to play that if this is what a typical gamer does, a one guy gamer, people don't ever see their team. If that's what their team looks and that's their effort, you want to compete with just your really bad camera, your really bad microphone, and your gameplay that is not cut up, has no like music in the background, for example. There's no cutting out the boring parts. You're not going to be able to compete. So even though you think you're doing the same thing, you are not doing the same thing, because there's not the same thought and effort put into your videos as some of your competition do. Because we can all I made this tweet the other day, right? About I just wanted to give some quick advice, some quick actual practical advice, like, okay, do this with your channel. And a lot of these people were tech reviewers. And I'm like, what you're doing is not necessarily wrong. But the problem is, you're competing with giants. You need to then start, either you're so unique or you need to be able to keep up the quality that these giant YouTubers have. Because else, why would somebody care about your Apple product review if Mark Lee... I'm butchering his name already, but everybody knows who I'm talking about. So if he is covering Apple, why would they listen to you? If there's somebody making the same content, way better, more production value. Mm-hmm. So either you are very unique or you're going to step up your game. So, and that's, again, I'm going to piss off a lot of people with this stuff, because it is the type of advice saying, like, you got to invest in all this stuff. And it's very, demotivating, but it is the reality. And if you can
Yeah.
face the reality and adapt to that, you actually have a chance to become big on YouTube.
I do think that like your point about just like a baseline level of expectation, like audiences do just have a different expectation than they did, like let's say 5 years ago, right? And also the cost generally, like the cost of equipment and microphones and stuff like that has come down a lot. So it's like if you
Yeah.
are going, like you said, if you are going to invest in yourself as a creator, yes, maybe you do start on your phone, but real quickly, saving up for like even a point and shoot camera. A lot of point and shoot cameras can shoot and stream in 4K now, right? So yeah, I actually do really agree with that feedback.
You could work, like you could try to create content for 12 months, or what you could do is you could work for 1 month, save up the money that you need in order to invest the other 11 months. But the thing is like this, those 11 months are going to be way better quality, way faster growth, and you're going to do better than those 12 months. So if you need like the beginning, a great camera, like great microphone, $100, right? That's what you're talking about. And that's entry level, of course. A camera, yeah, if you really want good quality, you're going to be looking at $600, for example. Great PC and all that stuff. Let's say you're looking at a 2 to 3K investment. But that's the thing is, if you're taking the series and you generally want to turn this into a career, companies don't start without budget either. So I mean, for something that you're serious about, now if you just want to have a small channel, great, you can do your phone, but don't expect to have 100,000 subscribers if you're not willing to invest or willing to, it's more an investment, of course, but willing to put in the effort and willing to go the extra mile to bring your content to the next level.
Do you think that you should invest in maybe this is like a chicken or the egg problem, but like, do you think that before you invest in the equipment, if you're an up and coming creator, you should actually like put in the work to do the research and see, because I don't know, one as a counterpoint to your point about investing in equipment,
I love it.
I do think that's important, obviously, but like,
Yeah.
I also have seen a lot of times where creators will spend a couple grand on equipment, but then they don't do anything with it. Like they don't make consistent content or stuff like that. So I'm wondering if there's like some happy medium where you can like actually put in a little bit of work to see, do you have what it takes to like put in the effort to be a creator before you drop all that money?
My opinion is that if you are being smart with your content, you kind of have what it takes. It is just that if it's not working out, you have to figure out like, how will it work out? What are you doing wrong, right? Because most people, and that's the issue, is that you got to create a vision. This is your vision, and if your vision isn't going to generate you what you want to get out of it, then you need to adjust your vision. You cannot stick to what you want. We're talking about audiences here. YouTube is about entertaining an audience. It's about the audience. It's not about you. And if you have a vision, what you could do is you cater to the audience, and you cater to the audience, but at the same time you stay true to your vision, and that's the way forward. And to come to your question, I do believe that you could already get started. And in the end, you could have the best gear in the world, but if you don't have great ideas, you're still gonna get nowhere. But it is a mix of everything, to be honest, right? It is not one or the other. If you have horrible editing and all that stuff, and great videos, the videos will do okay. Opposite way around as well. So it is a little bit of a mix, and I agree with your point as well. It's not just investing. And if you're going to invest but not try to really understand YouTube, then it's also a waste of an investment. But it's the same if you invest into sports equipment, for example, right? And sometimes it is very expensive, but you're not going to actually train to do the sports, then it's a waste of an investment. Right. So you're not going to buy sports equipment if you're not planning to do the sport. Same with YouTube. You're not going to buy YouTube equipment if you're not planning to actually do YouTube seriously. Now, if you just want to try it out, you could try it out, put a few videos out there, see if you like it before you do it. But if you decide, and I think that's also what this kind of conversation that we're having about is that, the people listening are those who are probably either very interested in the world behind YouTube or are like, you know what, I actually want to take it serious. And I do believe that most people have the potential to grow a 10 to 100,000 channel minimum. Beyond that, there might be some other factors that come to play, but most people have the potential. So at that point, it's just a question, how serious are you about it? If you're serious about it, you need to both invest time into knowledge and invest time into making sure that your videos are top quality.
Right, right. Yeah, so I want to switch gears like real quickly to talk about brand partnerships because I know you have some experience in that. And I was kind of curious like if you have some thoughts on what do most creators do wrong when it comes to work like forging brand partnerships. Like you've been around a lot of creators over the years, and like, you know, working with brands has become a quite meaningful part of a lot of creators' businesses in general, right? And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts of like lessons that you've learned over the years of like how creators could improve that whole process.
Yeah, no, so the biggest thing is this, you know, cater to the brand. As simple as that. Make it a buy button. You know, come to the brand and have your project figured out. So they just have to be like, how much does it cost? And you're like, this is the price. Boom. And they just click buy and everything execute. They don't have to think or anything like that. Because most likely when you talk to a brand, it's their marketing lead or anything that you're probably talking to. And they're going to say like yes or no. But if they feel like they have to put effort into it, that's more work for them and all that stuff. So if you know, the difference between a creator that gets a sponsorship and not is one creator could be like, hey, you know what, we can work together. This is the amount of money that I ask. And, you know, I can make an advertisement in my video. And then next to you, the one who gets the sponsorship is the guy who comes there and is like, listen, I got this idea. I'm going to integrate your video in this specific way. Here's an example, you know, and this is the way. Here's an example of how I'm going to promote your brand in other ways, you know, like not like I'm charging you for my YouTube, but in addition, I'm also going to make you a free TikTok on my TikTok channel, a free Twitter tweet on my Twitter, you know, all that stuff. That's free stuff. You provide a whole package and you showcase that package, right? And then you just tell them like, okay, you know what, this is what I have to offer. And then the only thing they have to do is they have to do like, hey, how much, you know? And then you start negotiating about the price. But at that point, they don't have to think about it. With the other guy, they still have to think about it. If you, I had this, to give an example, I had this YouTuber who I talked to, I think it's about 2-3 months ago already. But he had these notebooks, you know, those paper notebooks that you have in high school. And he has an audience for that stuff. So he had two options. Either he goes to a notebook brand and so he goes to a notebook brand and then says like, you know what, I want to do something with you guys. Or you do what he did, which is he designed the entire notebook already. And he was just like, listen, do you guys want to be the ones who release this out in all the stores? So he did exactly that. And boom, the guy made 200,000 sales in his project right there. So the brand is happy. He got a percentage cut. And for the brand, it was literally just to buy, in that case, also execute. But they didn't have to think about design, about all that stuff. Everything was just there already. They just had to execute and pay. So if you can do that to a brand and just come up with a project, you know, for them just to click buy, it's the easiest thing ever. And most brands actually have a lot of money. And you know, I know of a friend of mine who he was talking to Coca-Cola, and he said to me as well, like, in some countries, Coca-Cola doesn't even know where to spend their money anymore, their marketing budget. That's why, you know, at the end of the year, you got kind of like a drop type of thing, right? Where they just drop all the rest of their money. So if you just come there and it's like, hey, you know what, I can promote you this way, and this is the project I'm going to do. This is how much it costs. For them, it's just like, okay, buy it next. And they move on with their marketing. So yeah, that's the idea there. With the difference between the two, with what most people do or what you actually have to do with the brands.
Yeah, I'm laughing here because Max in the chat here said I know Justin is shaking his head about having preset prices. You know, because so you know, one thing that I often talk about is like it's hard to negotiate with yourself sometimes, right? So if you're coming in with like a menu item of prices and things like that, you could potentially be underselling yourself relative to like what the brand could actually compensate you for a particular program. But what I do like about what you're saying though is that by virtue of having a fully baked idea, or at least some sort of solidity around what you're proposing to them, maybe that isn't what you ultimately do and collaborate with them to do, but it gives them something to just wrap their heads around, right? Because
Yes, yes.
otherwise when you're approaching them and you're just like, oh, partner with me, like I'd love to collaborate with you, it's like that's literally what every creator says when they approach a brand, like, right? So it's like, how are you going, especially if you're the one reaching out, right? It's one thing if they're reaching out to you, like you have a little bit more negotiating leverage, obviously, but like when you're the one reaching out, you do have to be more intentional about what you're proposing, right? Because how are you going to actually even get a response as well as get them to compensate you? Because I think that's another area that's actually quite difficult for a lot of creators, is like they feel like, okay, like when a brand reaches out to me, like I get it, it's like, you know, they want me, so it's like I can charge them. But if I'm the one reaching out, how do I, oftentimes a brand will be like, okay, yeah, we'll give you free product, or we'll give you, you know, you talk about the brand in exchange for like us just sending you some product or something. But how do I actually say, no, you still need to pay me for this partnership? And like, to your point, when you do have some structure to what it would look like, it's easier to have that conversation, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because what the thing is like this: if you know your numbers, and that's actually something I also forgot to discuss, is know your numbers, right? If you know your numbers, you know what you're worth to them. And again, don't go to a brand that you know you're not gonna make a sale for. Because there's nothing worse than going to a brand at the point when you're not ready for it or you're not gonna make a sale, because they know a lot of other brands. They're gonna be talking. So if you go to a brand, be like, you know what, I can actually make sales for these guys. If you believe in your own sales speech, you can make them pay. And if they're like, yeah, we can give you free product, just show them that you're like kind of disappointed in that, like tell them like, that was not really what I was hoping that we could, talk a little about a compensation, because it's putting a lot of my time and effort, and these are the numbers that you're looking at. So like, I don't think I can settle for just free product, and just be open about it. Because yes, these brands, they sometimes they try to cut down on the price, but you have to be stable. If they're not willing to pay, that means that they're not invested enough. So either your speech wasn't good enough, or they're just not the right brand at that point. But most of the times, if it's the same with me, if somebody comes to me and is like, hey, you know what, I want to work with you, and I'm like, okay, let's do this, and they're like, I'll give you free shout outs on my YouTube channel. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense for me to do. Like, why would I do that? You wouldn't work for free, like, it's not that McDonald's, for example, says like, oh, we need extra people to work for us. Who wants to work for free? I bet their stores are going to be empty within no times. You got to pay people for their work. And this is the thing: if they're not paying for your numbers because some people are too small, let them pay for your time. Your time is worth it. You don't work for free, so why would you advertise for free? And that's the thing. 1,000 views is still 1,000 views. So that's the way that I would think about it. Just be honest and respectful to them. If they don't want to pay, if they're really keen on that, then say, you know what, I'm sorry, it doesn't work out. Sure, we'll go to somebody else. And if they know you're just going to go to somebody else, they'll either buy your stuff straight away because they don't want you to go to their competition, or they're just like, you know what, hey, nice to meet you. It was great to talk. And who knows? I've been rejected by people before. I as a streamer, I did some proposals, and a year later, suddenly, boom, you get an ambassadorship, and every single month you get an amount of money from them. So timing could not be right, but definitely don't undersell yourself. And on the topic, by the way, of the set prices, when I say like the buy button, obviously in negotiations, like if it's a brand like Coca-Cola, you can definitely put your price down, because who doesn't want to be connected with a brand like that? But if it's some really random, weird brand that nobody cares or knows about, then you could be, or that you don't even feel comfortable with, you could be like, you know what, I'll only work for you, or I'll only promote you if the price goes very high. Right. So obviously you need a little leeway, and you also don't want to price everything. Just keep it simple. But again, if they ask you, oh, what do you want in return? For me, it's easiest to know your value, know what you want, and yes, you could get more. But in the end, I'm one of the belief I'd rather make a good deal for a brand so they return and I get multiple deals, than to pick a deal that is just $100 more or anything like that, because in the end, you can always raise your prices or put your prices down. But that's a little on topic of that. So I do agree with you. You don't want like a price cheat saying like, okay, $10 for me to pull a smiley face, right, $10 to like, nah, that's a no-go.
What are your thoughts on this comment on the screen? Like, do you think that there's a difference in your negotiating strategy when the product is more valuable? Like, let's say a $20 product versus something that's $2,000.
Yeah, I do think so, because when a $2,000 product, it really depends on what type of product it is, for example. But you need to know the buying power of your audience. So if your audience, for example, is on the younger side, you're gonna have difficulties selling that $2,000 product. So therefore, you're going to have to, keep that in mind. And I think that's where it's important, is that when you go to let's say your audience is like that, you need to prove that to the brand and be like, listen, my demographic has this money. This is what my demographic looks like. They're this age. They're from these countries. This is their typical income, for example.
How do you find How do you find that out? How do you find out their like typical income, like household income?
So that one is a difficult one. But if you, for example, if you think about the financial niche, right, you could be like, okay, like you could ask your audience. That's one thing, for example. Like you wouldn't ask
do a survey or something.
Yeah, you could do surveys. It is very difficult, and this is time consuming to do that stuff. But at the same time, if you have that stuff, you have an edge over the guy that doesn't know, because these marketing execs, they're not like, oh yeah, you know what, we'll believe you. They want hard numbers. They want metrics, because they also need to report to their higher ups. So if you can give them the metrics, I mean, that's right there. And surveys, they're like another way to do that, as well as that when you have prior brand deals, for example, that of lower price, for example, the $20 ones, right? And that way you can find out the buying power, and it's like, oh, people easily buy this, or when there's two packages to be sold, people always go for the higher one, for example. That way you could have an idea. Of course, it is very tricky to know exactly what their income is and stuff. And I'm saying that because that one would convince them the most, but definitely demographic and stuff, where they're from, their age groups and stuff, whether they're male or female also matters a lot, because, for example, if you think, I'm gonna take it very simple, makeup, I'm quite sure that it's very female dominant, so, and there will be other stuff that is male dominant. So you really have to think about those things as well. And the more you know about your audience, the easier the sale will become. With a $20 partnership, most likely you don't need as much. But if you have high ticket sales, you need to know exactly who and what, because these companies, when they spend that amount of money on you, they want to make sure it returns back to them. So
yeah. That's for sure. Yeah. And actually, Dean Pham has a question that's actually perfect, because I wanted to talk about this a little bit, which is, her question is any advice for pricing an ongoing partnership? Let's say like a monthly price for 3 to 4 posts. So like on this topic about like figuring out how to price yourself, like what are your thoughts on like these types of ambassadorships versus like one-off type deals? Do you think that this is a type of proposal that you should come in with right away, or you think it's important to like kind of like prove out your performance before you propose something like this?
I think it is like, it is not bad to do it, because I think I had a few one-offs, but they never they were really bad one-offs. My first real good partnership was actually an ambassadorship. It really depends on the brand and how well they fit. Because if you're an ambassador, your content and you as a person really need to connect with that. I was a professional gamer, right? So actually, no, this is the wrong one. Here, there you go. This is this brand right here. It was Trust Gaming, right? It made sense. Their strategies. They wanted to go into the gaming industry. They wanted to seem like, hey, our stuff is not just this cheap stuff that you find in the store. This is quality stuff. So they needed a quality gamer in order to promote that stuff. So what I did is I went to them. We came with a 7-page deck. It was a huge deck, and we said everything that we're going to do for them, right? So all of these things, like, okay, in stream this, we're able to show up on events. No, like the cost would just be transfer cost, all this stuff. And what we did is, and then I would say, like, I will wear it. I will play my tournaments in your stuff and all that stuff. And that made them be like, okay, this makes sense because he's using our stuff. His audience connects with that stuff. It all makes sense. Why wouldn't we want to work with them? But if you like, so that is the perfect way. If you feel like you can do that, you might as well talk about the ambassadorship. Another way to do it, by the way, is to just come with 2 options. Give them 2 options. Be like, I would love to work with you guys on long term, and just already mention that and say, like, but I understand it's not easy to commit that long with somebody. How about this? I'm very interested. This is what a long term would be like. But if you're interested, let's do something. Let's do a one-off first and see if you guys like it. And if you guys like it, then we can talk about that. But at that point, you've already mentioned that you're interested in a in long collaboration. Now, if you have a great channel, for example, they might just be like, you know what? Sure, we saw your content, we love it. Let's do something long, because maybe that's their marketing plan. Some marketing plans are about these long term things, right? So definitely mentioning it is great. Promoting it is also great, and you could have the one-off as a step in. And worst case scenario, if it is a simple brand that you don't want to connect with, just go for one-offs. Don't do ambassadorships with brands that you don't feel comfortable with. And again, ambassadorships, another point as well, is make sure that this ambassadorship is somebody you are proud of, and that in 3 months, even if you've grown 3 times, 4 times the size, that they could either pay you the amount of money that you need to be paid when you're that size, or that you are still proud to work with them for the same amount of money. So it is a very complex way, but I would definitely mention it because it is worth it, and it is great. We talked about it as well before. It is great to have, like, I would say, like 2, maybe 3, and when I say maybe, it's really maybe, ambassadorships. You do that to have your income. It's great income, and then you could still do one-offs once in a while. But
Yeah.
ambassadorships, I think, are key in the end. If you manage to do it, they're just a little trickier in the sale wise.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And D, like, I think you also were asking, like, how do you figure out how to price yourself for those types of setups? And my advice usually on that situation is twofold. Number one, like, I think that it's absolutely reasonable to give some sort of a price concession if they're wanting to forge a longer term deal with you, right? Because number one, it gives you income consistency, right, and certainty. So like, if you forge a 6-month deal with them, that you have that check coming every single month, and that's valuable as a creator, right? So if you are as a result going to, like, give them a 10 or 20% discount or whatever it is, I think that's totally fine to do, because I think it gives you that lowers your anxiety, not feeling like where your money's going to come from in the next couple months or something like that. But it also allows you to tell them, like, hey, there is value in forging a long-term partnership, because we can continuously work together to hone and change the marketing messaging based on how things went the last month. So, maybe a particular message wasn't working well, so let's switch it up. The next month, I'll talk about something slightly different with your product, or maybe I'll drive them to e-commerce or something like that, or I'll drive them into the store, or whatever type of brand it is. You can tell them, like, I'm willing to be flexible about the types of things that I'm talking about each month for your brand. And the other thing too is that you can tell them, like, yes, this is going to be, I'm going to give you a price concession, like maybe let's say a 10 or 20% discount, but you need to sign a minimum 6-month deal with me or something like that. So you do need to, like, lock them in order to, like, secure that discount for you. So whether you want to give a discount or not, that's totally up to you. But I do think that is as a nice perk that you can offer to a brand for that type of setup. And Dee also said, yes, the anxiety, but she also said, my key in the pitch was providing consistent content, which they love the idea of. And that's exactly right, which is a lot of brands, they just don't have the time to be pumping out content on their own. You go to their Instagram or you go to their YouTube or whatever, it's very difficult. So it's like, a lot of times it's easier to partner with a creator because you're the one who's pumping out consistent content. So if you, as part of the partnership, can say to them, hey, I'm going to give you, like, 3 to 4 pieces of content that you can repurpose every single month on your platforms, that's a very compelling thing to offer to a brand. So I think that you're totally, like, going down the right path here in terms of, like, what you're proposing to the brand.
I've got a good like a good actually hint for pricing, right? Because it's also difficult sometimes, especially smaller creators. I think it's very difficult to know how much should I charge, because the bigger creators, they have rates, right? They have you just pick a rate. You start from 20 CPM and then you go up or down based on who you're working with and all that stuff. But the easiest trick is figure out the product that they have, figure out the profit margins that they have on those projects, and be like, okay, what they have. Let's make it very simple. We're going to do some calculations here. But let's say they have a $10 product, right? And that's probably going to be the main product that you're going to be promoting. You're going to have to assume, okay, 50% of that is going to be cost for them. That's not going to be profit. That's going to be to create that product. 50%. That's in a lot of companies, it's like that. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. But let's say, for the sake of this example, 50%. So that means that every product that you sell is going to be worth about $5 profit for them. So you have to think, if you do the promotion, how many products can you generally sell? So you say, for example, okay, let me think. My audience, for example, I assume that we're going to have a 1% of my audience is going to buy that, which in some cases low, in some cases high, but let's say 1%. So let's say you have 1,000 views, and then that means that there's 10 people. So then we do 10 times 5% of $5. So we're talking about $50. That's with 1,000 views. So if that's what you're expecting, right? That if you go over that pricing, then you are pretty much overcharging them. And $50 doesn't sound like too much, but again, if you charge that price, you tell them, like, worst case scenario, we get only 1% to buy your product, and this is what you make back, and you got some free promotion. So that that doesn't take into consideration future sales for them. And if you sell it that way, they're going to be like, he really thought about this, or she really thought about this. So it makes it easier to price yourself. Again, if you are a channel, for example, and you have a great community, and you have 10,000 people watching you, right? And you notice that, your engagement rate is great. About 10% of people like your stuff. You notice that when you post links, or when you talk about other products, for example, that people actually go to their website, you kind of have an idea about your conversion rate. Let's go back to this 1%. So 10,000 people, 1%, that's 100 people. Let's say 100 people of those invest $50 in camera equipment, right? Or whatever it is. $50 is on the low side for camera equipment, but let's say it is, right? So $25, then we're talking about 100 people, we're talking about $2,500 that company most likely makes. So at that point, there's no point in pricing yourself at $500 when you know that there's a very high chance that they'll make $2,500 of this promotion. So obviously, asking that amount of price is going to be extremely difficult. But if you talk that way, and if you make those numbers and you show those calculations and stuff, you will have a way higher likeliness of getting that sale and having them be like, you know what, let's put this person to the test. Let's see if these numbers are real. So that's also part of it, is to think about how much does their product cost, how much do I generally think people are going to spend, all that stuff. It's very complex, but if you think about it, you're a YouTuber, but YouTuber, I think, is one of the hardest jobs, because you need to be an expert in everything.
Yeah.
And sales is one of those things. If you're going to go to somebody's home and you want to sell them a new electricity package, you better know what package they have already, so that you know exactly how did you convince them to actually come to you.
Well, the thing I like the most about this thought process is that, imagine that you were a business, like just anyone listening, imagine it was your business, right? And you were trying to hire someone to do advertising for you, right? The whole point of it is you make money. That's why you're trying to do advertising, is you're hiring this person to go put a billboard up for you, or to like make a new sign for your store, or whatever it is. Your expectation is that you spend $500 on this sign, and then it's going to bring $5,000 worth of business into your store or something, whatever, right? You have to think about this. That's the exact same thing when an advertiser or a brand approaches you. The whole point of it is eventually for them to make money, right? So like what you're saying, Mario, like, I think it's incredibly important for creators to understand this. It's not just all about you. How much are they going to pay me, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, that's a result of this partnership that you're making, but you really have to understand, like, they're in this to make money. It's called influencer marketing. Marketing is the key. There's a key word there, marketing, right? So like, they're trying to like have some sort of business result by partnering with you. So if you can start thinking a little bit more in a more savvy way about these types of business relationships that you're forging, I think you'll be better off. So I 100% agree with that. So kind of to wrap things up here, Mario, I was wondering if you could share, like, is there any type of advice that you have for creators who are kind of starting out their journey, or aspiring creators, like what they should be thinking about to ensure that they're setting themselves up for success?
Develop a plan. I think it's do not go in without a plan. You're not going to fight a war before you know where to put your soldiers. And that's the same with your videos. I have a friend of mine, and I'll tell what I told him to do, so you guys could also apply this. But basically, I told him, okay, come up with 50 video ideas, right? Now work 10 of them out. And then, what you have is you have a bunch of video ideas in the pipeline. And then you start your first video, right? And get that done, be planned, analyze that video, start with your next one, but make sure that you have at least one learning from every video. If you don't have an active learning, if I ask you, what did you learn from this video, what went wrong, and you cannot answer that, that means that you're not thoughtful enough. And that's the same with anything that you do. If I consult with somebody or I have an hour session with somebody, I think to myself, okay, what did I do bad about this consulting session that didn't give the ultimate experience? Same with this. Now we're talking for like a good hour, right, about this whole brand stuff. I'm going to walk away from this stream and think, okay, what are the things? Where did I go wrong? What did I learn from it? What are the things I can improve on for the next time? Don't try to be perfect, but just make sure that you have a bunch of videos ready, or like have a direction ready, right? That's why I say 50 videos, so you have a direction, so you know what you want your channel to look like, so you can start working, make a video, learn from that, and then you already kind of have an idea what your next video has to be about or anything like that, and you take the learnings and you applied it, and by the 50th video you're gonna make great content, because every single time there's a massive step that you did forward. And yes, at the beginning that can lead to some inconsistency, but again, do a lot of research, be analytical about your content, be true to yourself, and be harsh on yourself. And if you don't know what's wrong with your content, ask your friend and tell them, listen, I know my content ain't scoring, tell me what's wrong with it. And most of the times people are like, yeah, your content is doing great, all that stuff. But if you ask a friend to be honest, they'll be ruthless and they'll put your ego straight down on the ground. But that's so beautiful about friends, because you know that even if they're harsh on you, they'll tell you exactly what's wrong with you. So if you can't figure it out, they'll give you that little push in the right direction. I do it all the time. Even with my clients, I tell them like, listen, we did an hour, you paid me really good money, but now I want you to tell me what I did wrong. And they'll tell me exactly. And it's harsh and it breaks me, because I put so much thought and effort into it, but at the same time, it moves me forward every single time. And it got me started from somebody who talks about, yeah, CTR is great, to now analyzing all the numbers, whatever.
Right.
So,
right.
And the same with videos. Just go video by video, but make sure if I ask you, what did you learn? Have a question ready.
I love it. Man, you dropped
already.
Yes, absolutely. No, you dropped so many gems today. Thank you so much, Mario, for joining. This was really, really fun. I really value your expertise. And, I think that, it's always valuable. I think it's always super interesting when people who were creators or were streamers or professional gamers, et cetera, transition into kind of the business side of being a creator, because, that's like a career path that I think a lot of creators don't think about, which is that, especially for the next generation of creators out there, there's going to be so much help that's needed for all these creators behind the scenes. So maybe, being a creator for the rest of your life isn't your path, perhaps, but all of these skills and expertise that you're learning now will actually serve you. And maybe you'll go on to help another creator out there on their creator journey. Right, whether it's editing or strategy or whatever it is.
Hey, that's what I did.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Right?
That's what I'm saying. Is like there is this whole support system and ecosystem needed to support the growth of the creator economy over the next 5-10 years or whatever. Right. So I think there's so much value in understanding the behind the scenes of this stuff, whether it's content strategy or monetization or whatever. I'm super impressed with your path. And I think this was a lot of fun today. So we'll have to do this again sometime.
I always say this, and I said this when I was a pro gamer, right? And I'm gonna say it even with this stuff. If I can do it, you can do it. If I can in 1 year go from somebody who barely knows anything about YouTube to somebody who gets hired by very, very big clients. If I can get that expertise, you don't need to become a consultant, but you can still do the same type of effort into understanding YouTube, that even if you understand like 10 of the points, like some of the points, obviously within these conversations were very vague, right? We could go super, super deep into the stuff, but the vagueness, and that's when I talk fake, what most people have to do is take one of the things that I said and try to really deep down. Okay, what does Mario really meant with this point, right? And if you just take some of the points that we discussed here and just go deep and really understand it, create your own little bubble of expertise, you're actually going to grow on YouTube. YouTube is, once you understand it, it's really not that hard. if I can just get somebody out of nowhere, rip, then that means that anybody can do that, rip, in the air. So no, but like I love being here, and also in the chat as well. Follow Creator Wizard.
Yeah. No, I was putting you guys definitely follow Mario on Twitter. Is there any other platforms that you're really active on, or is Twitter
No, I'm
the
only
most?
really Twitter. Like I'm out of YouTube and stuff. It's just I like to focus on my clients and just have some fun and focus on analyzing content. That's what I like to do. But most definitely, if they want advice, if they follow you, then I'm quite sure they'll get some good advice.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. If you guys want to share that you're watching the live stream, take a screenshot. We'll do like a concerned thumbnail, like
Oh,
right, like that'll be perfect. Yeah. But yeah, thanks so much again, Mario, for joining us today, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, and thanks for having me.
All right. Well, have a good weekend, everyone. We'll see you back next Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Thanks, Mario. Have a good one.